Good morning. Welcome to the Native Daughters Adobe Home in San Juan Bautista. We're at the edge of the historic district in San Juan Bautista. I'm very proud to have been here for about 80 years. Today is October 4th, 2014. Welcome. Good morning. I was first introduced to San Juan Bautista as we drove along the highway 101 for years, and I always wondered what was here. In 1958, I began to find out. At that time, we were farming over off of Highway 25 on Shore Road and Fraser Lake, where we lived. We needed to expand our farming from just sugar beets to other crops. So Richard Gularte and I began to look into the area of San Juan Bautista and found that we could farm the 300 acres on Mission Vineyard Road that belonged to the Holthouse family and the Lavaninos as well. So I was teaching school in Hollister then, and it was an easy commute from here as well as from over on Highway 25. And we moved here in November of 1959, actually, right after a huge September rainfall of 5 inches in the afternoon. So we came here to farm, and then we found that we could also join the hunting club that was on the Holthouse Ranch, which made an important connection to all the people who came to barbecues on Sundays when we met during the hunting season. And we also could continue to be involved in the music of the area. Richard was a musician. I had met him when I hired his band when I was in Hartnell College. He was part of large bands and small bands, and later perhaps I'll tell you more about what happened in the 1960s when Catamatories and the Lushbas and the people who really began to revive the whole area in San Juan. We were not very involved in San Juan except through the hunting club and the Holthouses, but downtown San Juan was sort of off limits to me. It didn't seem like the place I wanted to go. The only thing I knew about downtown was the bakery. There weren't many shops, so I stayed home. And one day someone arrived in my driveway out there on Mission Vineyard in a convertible, and it was Clifton DeRosa, who was a native of San Juan, with a lady named Paulina Lushba, whose husband was restoring downtown. And they suggested that Richard and I start volunteering and helping out downtowns. And that's how I got started. I wasn't even 30 years old. I began volunteering, and I've been doing it ever since. When we arrived, San Juan was rather run down, but because of the Lushba family, they were making changes to the what we call now the Cutting Horse or the Brass Lantern or whatever it's become, that whole block on 3rd Street. The Chapito's Garden that we later helped get going was empty, and it still is. The screen door on what became our real estate office at 308 3rd Street was hanging on. There was what became the Liar's Bench in the Historical Society Museum now was sitting out in front of it. The bakery was operating. The Paradis family had come and was operating that very successfully. Hardinus was early in the 1960s. The adobe there had a 2-story tin warehouse over it. Larry Lushba still hadn't taken it down. The back part of Jardines, as it stands today, did not have the theater on it. I hope that most people realize all of the buildings, except the adobe and the theater, were rebuilt in 1990 after the earthquake of 1989. I believe the little church on the corner of McKellamey and 3rd Street was operating. It didn't have shutters on it. It didn't have its steeple repaired because those were events that the Native Daughters and the Historical Society joined with the little church to repair. Way down 3rd Street, between 3rd and 2nd on Monterey, was a huge Victorian. That burned down since way back in the 1960s, and that's where the Luck Museum and Library are today. We didn't have the San Juan School at the beginning of town. We didn't have the windmill, that beautiful tall windmill plaza there with the big barn featured at the entrance of our town. It was a huge vacant lot. There, I believe we had a gas station at the entrance to the school, but perhaps it hadn't, the Union and or Chevron station hadn't moved there yet. So back in 1958, we had vacant lots, plenty of room for possible buildings to be built. The current bank space, regrettably for sale right now, was occupied by the lovely Queen Anne building that is down on the corner of 4th and Polk. It's too bad that was moved because it would have made a lovely building a home. People did actually in the old days live on Main Street right in the middle of town. The Hotel European, as my understanding, burned before we came, or if it burned during the time we were here, I didn't come downtown. I was so busy teaching school until 1964 when we actually moved downtown and left farming that I don't recall. I know historically that it's in the first block here on 3rd Street, but I don't remember seeing it. The Mora Hotel is still there, and that's where it used to be Mom and Pop's bar. I do remember that the original building where Daisy's is now was Vince's, and there was a terrible fire there, and so that was repaired and not exactly restored. The corner next to what is now Daisy's, where the clock shop is in today's world, was a restaurant. The same people who had the bar had the restaurant, and there was a bus stop along there. And interestingly enough, when I first came to San Juan, I discovered that the lady who ran the little bus stop area was originally from Big Sur, where I had grown up and gone to 2nd grade. So that was an interesting connection to San Juan for me. The Ferry-Moore Seed Company was the field right in front of our farming operation. I got to drive through the Ferry-Moore's property every day on my way to school and back and forth. And the glorious flowers on one side of my driveway and 100 acres of their pear orchard on the other side. It was just a wonderful, wonderful spot to be in. Our little house was situated so that we faced the little hill that runs along the base of the road to the Rancho San Justo, where Holthouse's main home was just lovely. I did not actually experience seeing the Jim Jack cabin where it was originally located on the San Juan Creek at the back of the Arceo Ranch. I knew it was there because part of the hunting club was the whole Vaccarezza and Arceo family, and I knew that those kids had grown up playing in that house. The important building that was on the property we actually farmed, and we actually used the little house, became the settlers' cabin down here at the state park. The settlers' cabin was located right across from what we used as our production shed for the bell peppers and the cucumbers. The change to that whole farming operation happened while we were still out there, when Bill McKenzie came to town and bought the Holt House area, farming area of the Holt House Ranch and some of the hills. Bill McKenzie had a long understanding of what history means, and because he had taught in San Mateo at a junior college, and he became interested in a young man named Martin Penn, who worked for him, worked around different places, and who wanted to record the history of San Juan Bautista. So the coming of Bill McKenzie made a big difference in all of our lives. It was through him and his encouragement that we finally became the San Juan Bautista Historical Society. That settlers' cabin was brought down to the state park. They accepted it, and Martin Penn himself built the foundation and restored it, where it is in the park right now on Polk Street. When it came time to consider the Jim Jack cabin as a historically significant building, we brought it downtown and left it at the park for a while, and they decided it did not meet their criteria of having been firmly established before 1880. So we were forced to move it to the city lot, and they graciously accepted it, probably for a short term, but we were forced to leave it there until it was completely restored and brought down to the Luck Park in around the year 2000, was that? I've forgotten. We moved into town because my husband had decided that we were not going to farm anymore. The Bracero program had gone out. We had depended for years and years in the Salinas Valley on the Bracero program. We continued to depend on them in our farming operation here in San Juan Bautista. And when that program went out, sending all of the regular workers from Mexico back home, we were forced to try to farm 300 acres with we had become specialty crop growers by then. Cherry tomatoes that required individual handling, cucumbers and bell peppers, red and green, required special handling. And we were forced to use workers who had been gathered in busloads as far away as Oakland to come down and try to farm. And it was just impossible. They were tired. They were transported back and forth each day, back to San Jose and Oakland, and it just didn't work. So we gave up farming, and because Richard had had a long history, and my family as well, in farming and ranching, it became logical that Richard would go into the real estate business, focus on farming, ranching, his understanding of water, and those issues. So that's what we decided to do. The great celebration in San Juan has always been, and still we long for it, was the fiesta. The whole community had turned out for years since 1946 and 47. After the war, the men who came back from the war through the VFW and the cement plant workers put it back together, try to bring back the tradition of the 1930s of having fiestas. The The professional rodeo people had been incorporated into the whole fiesta. We had the rodeo going every year. We had people cooking all night long, thousands of chickens, and the barbecue pits burning brightly, and every year we would go down and spend hours watching the men cook, eating fried chicken livers, and just being amazed at all the work that went into the production for the Sundays. We fortunately bought a house on 3rd Street down on Tuolumne when we first moved to town in 1964, and the parade went right by our house. We had so many good years of partying at our house, breakfast and parade and friends all day long. My father never missed a fiesta. He always came over from Salinas on the old San Juan Grade Road and made it a day with friends. And he had done that for years before we moved to San Juan, actually. The important things for me became the art show, which the Chamber of Commerce sponsored, again with the help of the Lushbas who came from Carmel, where their experience in the art business and shops and understanding what you need to do to keep a business going, and their love of architecture and history, all put together, that we had some great art shows here in San Juan from probably 1962 or 1963, clear up until they faded away and became more crafts fairs at the flea market and things like that. The emphasis the year before the famous flea market was begun was a harvest festival, and that was in 1963 when Richard and friends of ours were actually still farming, and we got all the farmers in the whole valley to participate, charged them $1 entrance fee, and we had a parade of farm equipment, cucumbers on the actual cucumber picker, if you can call it that. Parade down the street. We had little animals that people donated. I think that was the Lavaninos who donated a donkey that ended up in Hollywood. I forgot who bought that little donkey. It was a great beginning of what eventually the next year the people who had the antique shops in town decided, well, looks like a good thing, let's have another event, and they joined that with the art show again, and between the two of them we began to have people coming to San Juan. At first we thought, well, maybe hundreds would come, but it ended up having thousands, and that whole flea market became the antique fair that just celebrated its 50th anniversary this last Sunday. So I guess I've been here on the front of what's been going on in San Juan for a long time. When I think of significant people in San Juan, I will re-mention the significance of the Larry and Paulina Lushbaugh. I've mentioned the Paradis family, Bill and Gladys. Gladys was one of our first women mayors, actually, involved in politics. The other family that made a big connection for us to San Juan was the Cadamatori family, Alma Anriazi and her sister Rita Cadamatori. They came from Monterey and brought a very successful business history to the Casa Maria, which is owned by the Diocese of Monterey, and converted that from a community hall for the church into an Italian world-class restaurant. And people came from all over to stop in, have lunch at Cadamatories, have dinner at Cadamatories, and then enjoy what little there was to enjoy in those days in San Juan as far as shops, and then move on. They came back time and time again. I remember meeting our Congressman Sam Farr's father there for the first time, sitting down with our congressional representative, forgot his name. Someone will have to help me. He and his wife owned all of the Charolais cattle ranch on Salinas Grade Road. He was from Palo Alto. I'll have to remember that later. Those three significant people worked with their understanding of how to build a community, and I don't know how well accepted they were right away, but certainly they and we made our way into San Juan by joining organizations, keeping at it, enjoying what we were doing. It was obvious that what Larry Lushbaugh had planned for the middle block of the 300 block of San Juan Bautista was going to work. He opened the upstairs of what is now the hotel, and next door above the what is now the Happy Rooster, opened them as apartments where actually his wife lived, where Clifton DeRosa and his first wife lived upstairs, and another lady named Toots Harriman. Toots Harriman's father was George Harriman, the father of cartooning, Crazy Cats. She opened one of the first shops in the Lushbaugh building called The Store, and had a wood-burning stove in there, and a wonderful cat that when she died I inherited. And I don't remember what she sold. There were all kinds of books and things to do in that store beside buy things. And the Lushbaughs also had someone open the restaurant in what is now the hotel building. I think there were wooden benches there. It was called the Vendome. And so life began to happen in that section of Main Street. People came to the bakery, walked down to this section of Main Street, and all the while across the street were the buildings of the Crevilla family. John was operating the shoe shop. If you wanted to get into the clothing side, you went through the kitchen and met his mother, Mrs. Crevilla, always at the kitchen or cooking at the stove. And in that shop, you could find anything you needed to wear: shoes, belts, gloves, shirts, all kinds of things, all with the same price tag on that they had when they were first brought to the store. It was always fun to know that you could go downtown and get something for somebody in that shop at the last minute. If you'd forgotten somebody's birthday, you could find them a work shirt, or years later, I actually found some long red underwear to welcome somebody to San Juan. Those were the things that we loved about having the Crevillas there. And it was the Crevillas who kept track of us. Joe would stand at the door at night, and if there was a fire, he let people know. John and would sit on the liar's bench and talk with us. It was a main focal point was to find a spot, sit on the liar's bench there in San Juan, and that went on for years and years and years until we lost all of the Crevillas. Our own personal connection to the Crevillas was that Evaristo, who played accordion, was a member of my husband's band or small trio group. Evaristo played for years at what was the bar, the cutting horse. I don't know what to call it. It was the Brass Lantern, the cutting horse, the Vendome. Evaristo and Richard had a very sincere musical connection and enjoyed each other very much. Other significant people in San Juan, there was the group that eventually became the Historical Society, centering around, as I mentioned before, Bill Mackenzie and Martin Penn. The connection there in town was Marion Hublet, who owned the house at 2nd and Franklin Street that I now live in today. She had been here since, I believe, the mid-1930s and had been a person who started the chamber or revised the Chamber of Commerce, took a role in politics. She was a real estate person. I know that she and Joe Columber, who did a lot of building here in town after the war to follow his father's footsteps, had a lot of investments together. And Marion was a mover and shaker and enjoyed a good party. She lived right across the street from Clara Zanetta, and they were buddies. Clara had been our librarian forever in the Masonic Hall. It was also in the Masonic Hall where the first space given over to the Historical Society was used by Martin Penn for some of his writing and collecting. So Marion Hublet was the downtown connection for a lot of us who were new to town and wanted to become involved in what was going on here. And being involved in all of these organizations has led us to begin to evaluate the politics in town and how those politics seem to us to be related to the cement plant where everyone worked. So by the late 1960s, some of us who were newcomers challenged the smoke that was being generated by the cement plant. And that caused a big rift among the people in San Juan, misunderstandings. It was a very, very rough time. Every afternoon, a huge cloud at the cement plant would bloom over San Juan, and it seemed like the wrong thing to do to San Juan, to have those particles falling on town and all the and they were fine, but it was a white little thing you could detect. In fact, those of us who signed the petition, and there were only 18, it only required 18 signatures, I believe, agreed to put on our homes and businesses collectors. So the collections were made over, I don't remember what the amount of time, months it was, and they gathered particulate and it tested noxious. The federal government was prepared to use this little cement plant as its first test case of the environmental quality air bill, ordinance, law. I think we can find that information in the Reader's Digest from the late 1960s, that San Juan made it to the Reader's Digest because of the quality of its air. The local economy, according to all of the people who were involved in working at the cement plant and in the politics of the town as well, was tremendous, a tremendous undertaking to think that plant was causing trouble to some of us. It was difficult. It was never anyone's intention to close the plant. It was our intention to clean the air, to have the situation here looked at, studied, and remedied. The cement plant had been thought of early in 1907 when was the Panama Canal opened up and all the possibilities for growth in the western United States happened. The cement plant was a very important part of San Juan Bautista. Most people thought it was part of the city. It's in the county. It was the center of everyone's lives. The people who worked at the cement plant worked in City Hall, were at the VFW, were in every organization, were on the school board, Fiesta Committee, all intertwined. And so it was a very disruptive when and those of us even in the Chamber and the Historical Society were shocked when the result was that they were going to close the plant. And on top of that, it was Christmas. It was Christmas when Ideal Cement announced that it was going to close. I know they offered jobs to people who some moved on to other plants. Some went as close as, I believe Davenport was one of the options. Some were in other states, and families couldn't move. So it really broke things up. Some people chose other businesses. Leonard Catano went into the real estate business. I remember the day that they put all of the explosives into the cement plant and imploded it, caused it to fall down within itself. And soon it was hauled away. There is a story that Larry Kane told me that when he was in Belize, working for freight lines down there, where he and his family lived for years, that he saw one of the original engines that had been used on the little railroad here in San Juan Bautista. It had been shipped from here as a recyclable little train engine to somewhere down in South America. And Larry saw the bill of lading on a freight line one day. We had a very interesting conversation with the Jack Baxter and Leonard Catano, and talking to the Historical Society on one of our regular events several years ago. It's all on tape of what the corporate decisions were that we understand better today than we did then, that corporations make decisions and close plants rather than repair them, bring them up to standard, and that's what happened in San Juan. We lost the plant, we lost some friends, we were able to gain them back through our sincere work. And in fact, Leonard Catano, who was manager at the plant when it closed, eventually became the president of the Historical Society. So those connections they're a little difficult to think about, but they happened, and that's life. You just do what you can, the best you can, and sometimes it turns out to be a positive. I hope San Juan has not changed much.